Good morning. Today's daf is daf bet of Horayot. Congratulations on finishing Masechet Avodah Zarah. Now we are going on to Masechet Horayot, and so let me share my screen and we will get started. So Masechet Horayot, Horayot means rulings, and it relates to sins that take place because someone sinned as a result of a mistakenly permissive ruling. And then the sin is triggering a sin offering. So according to Rambam, in his introduction to his commentary on the Mishnah, on all of Mishnah, he explains there the ordering of Masechtot, of the different tractates. And he says that given that this relates to mistakes by Sanhedrin, this Masechta was placed here after dealing with the various rulings by the Sanhedrin and the ethics in Masechet Sanhedrin and the ethics associated with Pirkei Avot. So the idea is we have first, we have the rulings of the Sanhedrin. Then we had almost like as an aside or as a follow-up to certain of those rulings, we had Masechet Mako, we had Masechet Avodah Zarah that dealt with certain aspects of what a court does, whether it's enforcing lashes or it's dealing with a city or a situation where that people have engaged in idolatry. So as a result, we had those Masechtot come in between, but now we sort of get back to the topic of what a Sanhedrin can do, and we are going to see that a Sanhedrin that makes a false ruling can end up triggering a special sin offering that will take place if, in fact, the court issues a ruling and people follow that ruling. So that is the background. The first chapter of Horayot addresses what happens when the court mistakenly ruled as permitted something that is prohibited and subject to the punishment of kares. And we're going to see later on what happens if a Kohen Gadol does that, and of course is ruling for himself, and so as a result thinks that X is kosher and it's not. And same thing for a king. What happens in that situation? So that is what we are going to be discussing now. So let's dive right in. Horu Beis-Din. If a Beis-Din rules, and Rashi tells us, oh, this is a fascinating, one more thought on this. You will see as you turn the dapim of Horayot that basically Rashi is all over the place. You got Rashi on both sides of the page, and you have just a little Tosfos at the very bottom of the page. And so we are going to obviously do a fair share of those Rashis, and we'll do a couple of those Tosfos where appropriate. So in any event, Horu Beis-Din. So Kigon Horu Shechelev Odam Mutar. So this for top Rashi on in Bet on Aleph. We should always do the first Rashi, and we'll do the first Tosfos too. So the first Rashi says that when we say that there was a teaching, a ruling, so it's, for example, where they said that chelev, that's the non-kosher fat that's in an animal, or dam, or blood, mutar, is permitted to be consumed. And of course, we all know that that is not the case. And so as a result, you're not allowed to consume this chelev, and you're not allowed to consume that blood. And so, Tosfos all the way at the bottom of the page. There's a Tosfos heading in my Gemara, and then there's two lines that go fully across the page that identify the Bali Tosfos. But if you take a look, or that gives additional detail on Tosfos. But the first Tosfos in the two columns, Horu Beis-Din, excuse me, Haim Sanhedrin Gedola. This is referring not to just any Beit Din, but rather the Sanhedrin Hagadol. That's the one that is in Yerushalayim with the 70 plus judges, and Ukedarshinan B'Torah's Kohanim, as the Midrash on Vayikra says, Eidat Yisrael, Eidah HaMiyuchedet B'Yisrael. It's the congregation that is unique within Israel. Zu Sanhedrin Gedola. That is the Sanhedrin, 71 judges, and so as a result, that is going to be That's who's making this ruling. So they made this ruling. La'avor al, and back into the Gemara, third word on really, I guess, the first line, because the first word is on the top line. First full line. So la'avor al achas mikol mitzvot ha'amurot b'Torah, that they say that they're going to transgress one of that one should transgress one of the commandments in the Torah. So again, Rashi told us examples. It's eating chaylev or blood. V'halach hayachid, and now an individual goes v'asa shogeg, and he does inadvertently al pihem, based on their say so, that he does the item. And now the Gemara, the Mishnah, qualifies. Bein she'asu v'asa imahin. It doesn't make a difference whether he did it on his own and he did it with them. Bein she'asu v'asa achreihen. And it doesn't matter if he did it and he did it after them, meaning that the Beis Din first sinned and then he followed their lead. And bein shelo asu v'asa. Or it doesn't make a difference whether they didn't do it at all and he did it on his own, meaning they ruled, and he was the only one to follow that ruling. Patur, he is exempt. He does not offer a korban chatas, and so mibnei shetala bebeis din, because he was relying on the court. Now Rashi points out it is a little bit funny that it says v'asa shogeg al pihem, that he did a shogeg, meaning from his perspective he didn't do anything, and so as a result, v'halach v'yachiv v'asa shogeg al pihem. That's the second Rashi at the top of the daf. So mifarish b'Gemara, we're going to address that question in the Gemara. Why it says references shogeg? It should just say v'asa al pihem, that he did what they said that you could do. That where's the shogeg that's involved? And we'll see that there are two possible explanations that the Gemara is going to offer. Okay, and so, and then let's do one more Rashi. Patur, we say that he's exempt. Last word on the last wide line at the top of the first column of Rashi on the right-hand side. Patur, milahavi, kisva, useira, that whether it's a sheep, or female sheep, or a female goat, he is going to be patur from offering them. Those are the animals that are used as a sin offering. Hoil the talab abated, because he was relying on the court. Va'asa al piyam, and he acted based on their say so. So that is case number one. Case number one, you act on what the court says. You're not going to be liable for your own sin offering. Horu Beis Din, on the case number two now, the Beis Din again makes that same ruling. V'yada echad mehen sheto, and one of the judges realizes, he may have even been one of the disagreeing judges, and he threw a whole fit saying, you're making a big mistake. And so as a result, he realizes that they made a mistake. O Talmud, or if it was a student, v'hu roi lahora, but he was a sufficiently advanced student that he was worthy of making rulings as well. V'halach v'asa al piyan, and he decides, even though he knows that it is wrong, he decides that he's going to follow their word, follow their ruling. Bein she'asu v'asa iman. Doesn't make a difference whether he acted with the entire group. Bein she'asu v'asa acharein, whether he acted after the entire group. Bein shelo asu v'asa, or whether he acted alone and the entire group didn't act. Harei zeh chayiv, he is liable. Mimnei shelo talab beis din, because he did not rely on the court. He is smart enough on his own. He did it. He realized his own ruling, and he acted notwithstanding his own ruling. Now, if that's true, why don't we just say it's mazid? We are going to answer that question indirectly in the Gemara. Zeh haklal, here is the general rule. Hatola ba'atzmo chayiv, v'hatola bebeis din patur. If you rely on yourself and you reach your own conclusion with respect to the halacha, and now, notwithstanding that, you follow the ruling of the court, you are going to be liable for a sin offering. But if you just rely on the court, well then, patur, then you will be exempt. Okay, so we have now finished our Mishnah. We have highlighted this concept, again, the main general rule that we take away from this Mishnah is exactly what we just said. Last two lines of the Mishnah. Zeh klal, here's the general rule. Hatola ba'atzmo chayev, hatola bebeis din patur. That if you are acting, if the court says that blood or chela, fat, that is not kosher, is in fact kosher and you're allowed to eat it, if you act on it because the Beit Din told you that it was kosher and that's the only reason, well, then you're not going to be liable for a sin offering. But if in fact you thought you know the halakha and you realized it, but you decide to follow the court anyway, well, then you're going to be liable for a sin offering. So that's the background. And now we go into the Gemara. So the question is, how far does the court need to say in its ruling? That's the question that we're going to now say. So Amar Shmuel says, La'olam ain't based in Chayavin. You're not going to, now background, just again, a reminder for everybody out there, that if in fact the community follows the ruling, the improper ruling of the Sanhedrin, well, then there is a special sacrifice. It's a par ha'alem davar, an error based bull. And this is a sin offering that the community makes if it follows a ruling of the court and as a result sins. So Amar Shmuel, so Shmuel now in the beginning of the Gemara tells us, L'olam ain based in chayavim, the based in, and namely the community, is not going to be liable, ad sheyomru lahem mutarim atem. They have to actually say that it is permitted for you. It's not enough for them to think that it's permitted for you, to discuss that it's permitted, to possibly rule that it's permitted. They have to actually say it's permitted. Rav Dimi, Nahar Da Amar, and Rav Dimi says, no, that's not enough either. Ad sheyomru lahem mutarim lahem la'asod. It's not just permitted, it's permitted for you to do. So as a result, meaning you have to actually confirm the permission. So my taima, why is it not? Why is the just saying mutarim lahem is not enough? Levisha lo nigmara hora. It's not completely conclusive until a person says that it's lasot. So Amar Abaye afananami tanina. Now you know what? I think Rav Dimi is correct. We have a proof from a Mishnah. There's a Mishnah in Sanhedrin. The Mishnah is discussing a Zakein Mamre. We saw this, of course, in Masechet Sanhedrin, that a Zakein Mamre is an elder who rules in a particular way, and his ruling is appealed to the Sanhedrin, and the Sanhedrin finds that his ruling is not correct. And now this person who ruled in a particular way rebels and essentially says, I'm going to continue to rule the way I want to rule. So if the Chazar Le'iro, if that Zakein, that judge, goes back to his home city, and Shanav Alimid Kederach Shalimid, and he continues to teach the halacha the way he thinks it should be, patur, he's not yet going to be liable, because when you learn in the Beit Midrash, it's theoretical. It's not practical. And so as long as he is not saying his teachings from a practical perspective, he's not going to be exempt. Hora la'asot. As soon as he teaches it that you should do, chayav, then he's going to be liable. And so as a result, this is completely consistent with Rav Dimi. Rav Dimi said it's not enough to say maturim lahem. Matirin lahem. Mutarin lahem. Mutarin lahem is the language of the Beit Midrash. Mutarim lahem la'asot is the language of a permissive ruling. So that's Abaye's proof. Amar Rabbi Abba says, you know what? I've got another support for Rav Dimi. Afananami tanina, horu law based in Elahinase. That if a basin, now this is a case, this is Masechet Yevamos, and we're dealing with a woman who is not sure whether her husband has died, And if the Beit Din says that she's allowed to remarry, v'halcha v'kilkala, and she goes and she ruins things, messes things up. Rashi tells us v'halcha v'kilkala biznus. She engages in a non-marital relationship. And now her husband came back. Again, continuing in that Rashi. So chayeves b'karban, she is going to be liable for a sacrifice. Shelo hitirula ela lehinaseh, meaning the ruling was horula based in lehinaseh. It's by you focus on exactly what was permitted. And so here, la'asot and lehinaseh are parallel to one another. And so you need that kind of language. Without that kind of language, you're not going to have a permission, and the permission is limited to based on the language. And so without the word la'asot, you're not permitted to do anything. So as a result, that's why this woman, even though the ruling would have allowed her to marry anyone she wanted, and the ruling therefore would effectively say that there should not be a korban for having relations with anybody, even in a non-marital situation, because the court specifically only permitted her to marry. Having an extramarital relationship is not covered in that permission, and therefore she will need to offer the korban chatas for her sinning because her husband turned out to be alive. Okay, third proof, Amaravina, Afananamitanina. We've got another proof based on our Mishnah. Horu, based in Lavor. If the court rules Lavor in order to transgress alakas mikol mitzvot ha'amura b'Torah. So, tulo mini, you know what? We've got three great proofs. All of them are wonderful, and as a result, you don't need to say anything more. Clearly, the halacha is like Rav Dimi. You need to say lasot. Ika da amri. Now, having given all of that, you don't have to say that actually that was what the Gemara said. That really there's an opinion that flips the opinions. That it was Shmuel Amar. Amar Shmuel says, Ein based in Chayavin Achi Yomru Lahem Mutar Matem Lasot. You actually have to say Lasot according to Shmuel. It's not Rav Dimi who said it. It was Shmuel. And Rav Dimi Minar Damar Afilu Mutar Matem Nigmara Hara. No, even just saying Mutarin Atem would be sufficient. So now Abaye, Rabbi Abba, and Ravina are now going to be brought as challenges to Rav Dimi rather than support. Amar Abaye, v'halo tanan hachi. But one second, didn't we learn the following in the Mishnah? As we saw, this is a Mishnah in Sanhedrin. Chazar le'iro, when the Zakim Amri gets back to his city, v'shana olimed kederach shalimed pator. Hora la'asos chayav, that it's only when you say la'asot that you're going to be liable. So, and moreover, Amar Rabbi Abba, and Rabbi Abba also challenges Rav Dimi. V'halo tanan hachi, didn't we also learn in the Mishnah in Yevamos Horula based in Hinaseh, the court says that you can remarry v'halcha v'kilkala, and she doesn't remarry, but rather she acts, she has a relationship outside of marriage. Chayavas b'karban, so she's going to be liable to bring an offering. So shelo hitirula ela lehinaseh, because the court only permitted her to marry, meaning you got to focus on the action verb. Ravina, and Ravina said, because again, the reasoning would have even said that she shouldn't be liable even for an extramarital affair. But in fact, okay, see you later. But in fact, the problem is that it's not only an extramarital affair, but even, but it's not just, but the court, when it specifically said lehinaseh, it limited it to the action of marrying. And so as a result, because she didn't actually do that action, she's going to be liable with a sin offering. Ravina, v'halo tanan hachi, and not only that, but we also have our own Mishnah. Horu based in la'avor. If the based in says that you can transgress, it tells you to transgress. Al achas mi kol hamitzvos hamuros b'Torah. Again, la'avor is a language of actual action. And so tulo midi, again, we don't need anything more. Clearly, either Rav Dimi's view is correct in the first view, and Rav Dimi's view is incorrect in the second view. All right, so now our Mishnah, so that we explained all of that, and now the Mishnah explains why the Mishnah mentioned acting b'shogeg, acting shogegs, because it said v'halach hayachid v'asa shogeg al pm. So why does it need to worry about the word shogeg? What is that coming to tell us? So v'halach hayachid v'asa shogeg al pm v'nisner v'asa al pm. Why not just teach it as that he acted on what they said? That would be sufficient. Shogeg lamali. Why does it reference shogeg? So Rava says, here's why. Shogeg, when it says that he acted inadvertently, latuye horu beitin shechelev mutar v'nischalev lo chelev b'shuman v'achlo. So what we're dealing with is the following case. The Based in the Sanhedrin says that this piece of meat is kosher meat, right. And now this chalev that is now considered kosher according to the Based in, according to the Sanhedrin, gets mixed up with a piece of kosher meat, and so now we're not sure which one is which, and you eat the one that is that turns out to have been chalev. Now the question is, do we say, well, look, the whole reason that you ate it is because you got messed up and you didn't know which one was which? That is a shogeg situation, and therefore you should be liable for a sin offering. Yes, if you would have known that it was a chalev, you still would have eaten it because the Beit Din told you to, but told you it was permitted. But the real fundamental basis of your sinning was the fact that you weren't so careful to know what piece is what. And so as a result, maybe you would have to bring a chatas in that situation. And so as a result, Rava says, no, in that situation, patur, you are going to be exempt. And al pihem, what does it tell you al pihem? Al pihem mamish, meaning obviously, if you act based on just what they say, and you know this is a piece of chalev, and you eat the chalev because they told you it was permitted, well, then that's going to be the case of our Mishnah also. So the bottom line is, in this first read of our Mishnah, when it says shogeg al pm, it means shogeg, where you don't realize that you're eating chalev, and al pm, and if you do realize that you're eating chalev and you're going to eat it because they told you. But there's another answer, another way that this Gemara may have happened. And so Rava says, no, shogeg al pm hu depater, that it's one case. It's only going to be permitted when you act, when the inadvertency is based on the court saying so. But if in fact you were to mix up the chalev, which even though the court has now told you that it's permitted, but now you mix it up with a kosher piece, you think you're eating the kosher piece, and it turns out that you eat the chalev, that's the classic situation of being liable for a sin offering, and so we're going to still make you subject to the sin offering, even though you would have eaten it anyway. So milsa de pshita leila Rava. Now, although we have two different versions, in both versions, Rava is certain what the halacha is. Nice. Either it's going to be you're liable or you're going to not be liable. But in any event, whatever was clear to Rava, coming by Rami Bar Chama, it was unclear to Rami Bar Chama. To boy Rami Bar Chama, because Rami Bar Chama asked the question, Horu based in shechelev mutar, if in fact the court rules that the chalev is permitted, v'nischalev lo b'shuman v'achlo, and now it gets mixed up with a kosher piece of fat. Mahu, what's the law? So Amar Rava again, who is clear on it, says the following. Now, according to this, we're going to have two different versions of Rava, because we have two different versions of Rava before. So first, Amar Rava, Tashma, halacha yachid v'asav shogeg al pihem. Again, why in our Mishnah does it say shogeg al pihem? Shogeg al pihem lamamili. Why does it say all of that? Lavla tuye horu based in shechalev mutar v'nischalev lo chalev b'shumin v'achalo patur. Isn't the additional word coming to teach us the extra law of saying that, in fact, if you made this switch up that you are asking about, Rami Bar Chama, if you made this switch up, you're still going to be exempt? So, and the response was back, no, Dilma shogeg al pm hu depater. Maybe it's one concept that you have to be shogeg based on their word. But in fact, if you mixed up chaylev and fat, you'd be liable. And so now we understand why Rami Bar Chama is uncertain. Basically, Rami Bar Chama is uncertain because of the two different versions of Rava and Ika de Amri. And you know what? There, of course, now we need the other version of Rava. That they're the version of Rava that says that there are those who say, Amar Rava, Tashma, Halach Yachab Asa Shogeg al PM, my lav Shogeg al PM who the putter. Aval nischalev lo chalev b'shumin v'achlo chayav. No, it's only one concept. It's a shogeg al PM. Meaning the bottom line is, do we read it shogeg and al PM, or do we read it as shogeg al PM? And so again, in this read, Rava is saying, no, we read it as one item, one case. And so as a result, if you mixed it up, you would be liable. And then the response back by Rami Bar Chama is no, Dilma o Shogeg o al PM. Maybe it's two cases. So we don't actually resolve that, at least so far. So Biplugta Haru based in Shechelef Mutar. So this question and the two different views of Rava was already an argument beforehand. So that we have the following lesson. Horu based in Shechelef Mutar. You have a based in that rules, a Sanhedrin that rules that Chelev is permitted. Unischalev lo Chelev b'shumin v'achlo. And now it gets mixed up with some permissible fat. Rav Amar Patur. Rav says you're exempt, meaning he reads it as O Shogeg, O Al Pihem. And Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayav, and Rabbi Yochanan says no, you're going to be liable because he reads it as no, Shogeg Al PM. It's one concept. So bottom line is, we see that not only was this something that Rava and Rami Bar Chama were discussing, but even earlier Amarayim, namely Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, also had this argument. Meisvei, me am ha'aretz ba'asosa. 1 second. I can say to you, Rabbi Yochanan, say that you're going to be liable, but I am going to cite to you the following brisa that says that suggests that no, you won't be liable. Let's take a look and we'll see it. Me'am ha'aretz ba'asosa. This brisa is talking about sin offerings generally. And in the language of Me'am ha'aretz ba'asosa is from Vayikra Perek Dalid Pasuk Kav Zayin, which is talking about general sin offerings. And it says, from among the people of the land by his action, ba'asota, through his doing. Parat lumumar, meaning that the only situation that you're going to be liable for a sin offering is if you are not a mumar, meaning a mumar is somebody who is, denies the mitzvot generally and just violates them more broadly. As we say, let's take a look in two Rashis. First Rashi is third line down in the Y lines at the top of Ben Amud Aleph on the left-hand side. Me'am ha'aretz ba'asota, meaning the language of this parsha of saying of this pasuk when it says Me'am ha'aretz me'asosa, Me'am ha'aretz, from among, suggests the low kol am haaretz, and not everyone. So who is excluded? And so we read in the next Rashi, Prat lamumar, third line down, end of that line, de'eno mevi korban, a mumar, somebody who is it defines here as renegade, but basically somebody who violates the Torah regularly. So he is not going to bring a sacrifice al shigagaso based on his accidental action. De'ein mekabel miyado, we're not going to accept it from him because he is somebody who doesn't pay attention to mitzvot. So you don't get to take advantage of a sin offering providing you atonement if you're not sinning accidentally. This is a person, he might have accidentally done this sin, but if he had known about it, he would have done it on purpose. Yeah. So that you don't get away with that. So Rabbi Shimon ben Yossi Omer Mishum Rabbi Shimon Eino Tzarech. You don't need to tell me that is based on Me'am ha'aretz. I'll tell you another reason why this person is not going to be able to offer a sin offering. Harehu Omer, because what does it say elsewhere in the Torah? This is Vayikra Perek Daled Pasuk Kaf Bet and Kaf Gimel. Asher lo ta'asenu b'shgaga v'ashem Oh hoda, that if the person that says they're not going to be doing something and he does it accidentally and becomes guilty, and then the next verse begins, or if his sin becomes known to him, meaning that there is this connection between knowledge and or lack of knowledge and the general concept of shogeg. So hashav midia, so maybe carbon el shigagoso. If one would have refrained from transgressing, if he had the knowledge, so then that's the person who gets to bring a sin offering. Lo shav midia, so if his knowledge would not have resulted in him refraining from doing the action, Enu maybe carbon al shigagoso. He's not going to bring an offering. So this mumar would not have changed his mind if he knew that it was chalev, and so he would have eaten it anyway. So he doesn't get to bring a shogeg. So let's now apply that to our case. Our case is the court says that chalev is kosher. And now this person mixes up a piece of chalev with a piece of kosher shuman, and now he eats the chalev by accident thinking that it was shuman. Well, if he in fact knew which one he was going to eat, he still would have eaten it because the Beis Din had said it was kosher. So as a result, he should not be able to offer a sin offering. And Rabbi Yochanan says he can offer a sin offering. So that's the challenge to Rabbi Yochanan. Ve'im Isa, but if you, and now the Gemara explains, if in fact Rabbi Yochanan is right that you can't bring, that you have to bring a sin offering if you mix up the chalev and the permitted fat, halo shav midiyasohu. This person would not have refrained. He wouldn't have changed his mind. He wouldn't have done tshuva and changed his decision if he had known what in fact he was eating, because he would have thought, hey, the court said it was permitted. So Amar Rav Papa explains, Kasava Rabbi Yochanan, Kevan Dechi Misyada Lahu Lebeidina Hadrabahu, Nami Hadarbe. Well, 1 second. The question is how far back do you need to go? What is it that we're undoing? When we undo the knowledge, we're not only going to undo the knowledge as to whether this piece is chalev or whether it's shuman, but we're also going to say, hey, what if the court got it right? In that situation, would the guy have still eaten the chalev? Of course not. Of course he wouldn't have. And so that's why we're going to say that, in fact, if he would have known the entire truth, he wouldn't have done it. And so he is capable of bringing a sin offering. Shav midiyaso karina bey. So we're going to call him somebody who would have retracted what he did. So chayiv v'chayav. And so as a result, he's going to be liable. Amarava. So we've now shown there's no proof in one direction or the other, and now Rav is going to add a concept to Rav's perspective. Moda Rav she'enu mashlim larov tzibor. We are going to see that in order for a par helam davar, this bull sacrifice where the court rules and everybody sins, you need a majority of the community to sin. And if you don't have a majority of the community sinning, well, then you're not going to have to offer this par halam davar. So Rava tells us, Moda Rav she'enu mashlim l'rov tzibor, that this person who just got confused as to whether this piece of meat is chalev or shuman, that person doesn't have the true same kind of violation of the same kind of accidental sin as the rest of the community. Why is the rest of the community eating chalev? The rest of the community is eating chalev because the Beis Din told them to eat chalev. They told them it was permitted. But this guy isn't eating chalev based on that. He's eating chalev because he thought it was shuman. So as a result, that in that situation, we're not going to allow this person to make up. So if you imagine a situation where exactly half of all of Israel sins based on the ruling of the court, and now this one person would turn it into a majority, but we don't have a majority yet. But so the answer is you know what? This person does not count, and therefore would not make it a majority. And my taima, why? Because Amar Krab B'Shkaga, it needs to be inadvertent. and ad sheyahu kulan bishgaga achat. It doesn't say, it says inadvertence in singular. So as a result, it's not going to be true until everyone has the same shogeg, the same inadvertence, meaning not really everyone, it just means a majority, but a majority has to have the same inadvertence. And Rashi points it out. Let's take a look at Rashi. It's on the right-hand side of the page. There's a Tozos Harash. If you go all the way across to the left-hand side of the page, the Rashi just about a line up from there. She'enu mashlim l'rova tzibor me'emevi and par. And so as a result, you would not bring a bull. The be'inan sheyehu kulan mamish, because you need literally all. And of course, the ironic thing is when sometimes, usually when you say literally, you don't mean literally, and that's the case here. He doesn't mean literally every single person, rather he means a majority. But kulan mamish shogegin bishgaga achas al pi beis. So you need to have a majority all sin based on the same concept. And so that is those two different opinions. Okay. Now the Gemara cites the next piece of our Mishnah. Bein she'asu v'asa imahin. It noted the same ordering, both in connection with the person who is following the ruling and in connection with the person who is following his own thoughts and following his own ruling. So, lama le lemisnei kolhani. Why did it need to teach it over 2 times? Bishlam Aresha, I understand why it told me about doing it with everybody, doing it after everybody, and doing it on your own when it comes to the Resha and saying that the person is not going to be liable for a sin offering. Lo zu avzuktani. That the point is that not only this one, but even that one. Elasefa de lechuyuva. It should be the opposite order if we're going to do lo zu afsu. And Rashi explains what's the lo zu afsu. Dahaki mashma, next Rashi, dahaki mashma, maybe 2 Rashis down from where we just last did Rashi. So this is like a line or 2 below the Tosas Harash on the right hand side. Dahaki mashma lomi baizu. Not only this, da'asa imahen. Not only if you do it with them. Do we say dahavi vaday tola bebeistin? Do we say that of course if you sin with the Beis Din, it's clear that you don't have any basis to do it on your own because you're not your own Talmud Chacham. Well, then of course we're going to say that that you were relying on the Beis Din, but the putter, and so therefore you're going to be exempt from offering a sin offering. Ela af zu. Also, this case, nami de asa acharayim. If you do it afterwards, havi tola bebesin. That's also considered relying on the Beis Din upater, and you're going to be exempt from offering a sin offering. V'lo zu bilvad, and not only that, de asa acharayim. Even if you that you did it after them, de pater ela afzu de lo asu Beis Din ba'asa. But even if the Beis Din didn't do it and you did it by yourself, afilu hachi tola bebeis din havi upater. In all 3 cases, that's why you're going to be exempt. So why, in the second case, it should have gone in the opposite order to make the point of not only this but that, but this. So as we turn to Beit HaMabet, the Gemara answers no. Zo be'ain tzarich lomar zo ketani. It's giving us this and of course this situation. So that's the what the Gemara is coming to do. That's what the Mishnah is doing. And so as a result, that's why it just decided that it was going to give the same order in both cases. Okay, so next, V'yada echad mehen shito o talmud v'roi lahora. We say that there's either somebody from the court realizes it's a mistake, or somebody who's capable of teaching, and then they go and they do it. We're going to say that they're going to be liable. So tarzi lamali, why do I need to teach both cases? Amarava itzrich. You need both cases. Salkatayt gamina. I might have thought hanimili gamir v'savir, that the only person that is going to be subject to this rule is somebody who both has the background knowledge and is able of making deduction. Aval gamir v'lo saver lo. But if you only have one, if you only have the knowledge but you don't have the ability to make deductions, so then you won't be subject to this rule. So as a result, the Gemara teaches us both. So Amrle Abaye lahora. But 1 second, the Mishnah references the ability of the Talmud Lahora to teach. And Gamir v'Savir Mashma, to be able to teach, you need to know, both have knowledge and have the ability to do deduction. So your whole logic doesn't work, Rava. So Amrale, Anahacha Gamina. No, Rava says back, no, this is what I mean to say. Imehahi. If it was just based on the judge case, Hava Amina, I would have thought Hani Mili Gamir B'Savir, that only somebody who's able to have knowledge and deduction of Al Gamir Below Savir low, but not if you have only knowledge and not deduction. So Tana Roy Lahora. And so as a result, now the Mishnah says, no, it's if you have the ability to do a worthing. Mishnah Yisera. From the fact that we teach the extra case, that's going to tell us that makes something extra. Afilu gamir velo savir, savir velo gamir. And so as a result, we're going to say, no, even if you have either knowledge or the ability to make deductions, that's enough to make you in this category, that if in fact you could have figured out that in fact they were mistaken, well then that's going to be enough to be problematic. So I'm sorry for not scrolling, so let me leave it on this. So that is the situation. And so as a result, we learn from this that in fact, the reason that it mentions both is because it is telling us that you don't need to be a perfect teacher. You need to just have either the knowledge or be able to make the deduction that would result in that knowledge. So that is the bottom line there. So Roy Lahora, who is it that is fit for teaching? Kagon Man, who is that? So Amar Rabba, Kagon Shimon ben Azai, Shimon ben Zoma. It's like those guys. So Amar Le Abaye wonders, Ki Hai Gam the Mezidhu. But those guys are very knowledgeable. If they made a mistake, why would he be allowed to offer a sin offering? If you do something on purpose, you're not allowed to offer a sin offering. But 1 Rabba responds, according to your reasoning, Hadatanya, that which we learned, that if he transgresses, if he does it on his own, he's going to be liable. Based in Pater. But if he does it based on the court ruling, he's going to be exempt. Ketzad, what's the example? Horu based in chelev mutar. If the basin rules that chelev is permitted, v'noda le'echad mehen shito, and one of the judges knows that it's mistaken, O Talmud Yoshev lefanehem v'roy lahora, or a student who's sitting before them who's able of ruling, kigon Shimon ben Azai, like Shimon ben Azai, who I just mentioned. So Yachol Yehe Patur. I might have thought that he should also be exempt. So Talmud Lomar ba'aso ta'akat. But that if he did one of them, Yachid ha'osa al piyatzmo chayav, if he acts on his own, meaning if he has the necessary knowledge, then he's going to be liable for a sin offering. So Bahoraz based in Patur. But if he focuses just on the court ruling, well, then he's going to be exempt. So Elahechi mishkachallah. So how do you find it? Meaning, what's the case at the end of the day? Kagon de yada de asur, where he knows that it was permitted. And the problem is he thinks the following. Well, the court ruled in this way, and therefore I'm obligated to follow that court. Nami. And so as a result, I have to do it. So the mistake that he made, and for which he's going to offer the offering, is the mistake of thinking that he has to listen to the rabbis in this case. And so that's the basis, that even though, yes, he knew that he made a mistake, he knew that the court was mistaken, but he thought that he was obligated to follow the court. And so as a result, in that situation, he would be subject to a sin offering. So we say at the very end of our Mishnah that in fact one who follows the general rule is if you rely on yourself, you're going to be liable. If you rely on the court, you're not. So la tuye mai, what is it coming to include? Meaning what case we don't need this general rule if it's just telling us over the same principle that we already saw. So la tuye mevayet behora. It comes to include somebody who rebels against the ruling of the court, meaning that if in fact they generally rebel against the ruling of the court, and now the court rules that they can eat the chelev, you can't now say, oh, I am going to follow the court in this case. You're a rebel. You don't listen to the court in general. So as a result, we're not going to give you an out if you now eat this chelev. So Tola beveistin. And what about if you now rely on the beistin? What does that come to include? La'atuye horo beistin v'yadu shito v'chazru behen. That if in fact the beistin makes a ruling And you know what? It figured out that the chaylev is in fact not kosher, and now it changed its mind. And it said, oh my gosh, I can't believe we made that decision. Chaylev, of course, is not kosher, but you didn't hear about it. And so now you eat the chaylev, only knowing about the original decision and not knowing about the later decision. So in that situation, we're going to say that you are still going to be exempt. Habahedra Katani. But one second, we are going to learn that ruling, God willing, tomorrow or the next day on the on I think the bottom of Gimel Amabet. So Tani V'Hadar Mefarish. Yeah, you're right. We're going to learn that ruling shortly in another day or so. But the bottom line is that we are going to we're teaching the principle now, and now we're going to explain it in detail. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Zo Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah. Okay, so now back up, and we're going to now. This is one of the most complicated Gemaras that I've seen. So we're going to try and go through it a little slowly in order to get it all. But I note that ahead of time. So put on your thinking caps, and hopefully we'll get it together. So now the question is who is the author of our Mishnah? And what we're going to end up saying is, you know what? The author of our Mishnah is not a universal opinion. We're going to see another opinion that says, you know what? When you don't have a majority, when all you have is this one person doing the violation, you know what? He does have to bring a sin offering. It's only when you bring the Parsha Halam Davar, when you bring the sacrifice based on a majority of the community sinning, that's when the individuals don't need to bring their own personal sacrifice for having sinned. So those are going to be the two opinions. Again, our Mishnah says even a single individual who follows the court is going to not be liable for a sin offering. After all, he followed the court. And then the second is going to be, no, we need to have some sin offering here. And only when we have the Parsha Helem Davar, when we have the court-based bull, because everybody sinned, because a majority sinned, that's where we're going to have the case. But otherwise, we're not. Okay, so Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. So Zo Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. Aval Chachamim Yachid She'asa B'Hora Beis Chayav. If you only have one person who violated the Torah based on the teaching of the Beis Din, that person is going to be liable. So my Rabbi Yehuda, how do you know that it's Rabbi Yehuda? The Tanya, because we have a brisa. Now note, this brisa does not mention Rabbi Yehuda. We are going to prove tomorrow how we know that it's Rabbi Yehuda, but that's going to be for tomorrow. So we have, if an individual will sin inadvertently, and then a couple words later, ba'asota, with his doing it. So the word nefesh, the word achat, and the word asota are all limiting words. Harei elu shlosha miyutin. These are three different limiting things, and so from one of them we're going to learn ha'osa mipiatzmo chayav. If you do it on your own, you're going to be liable. B'horas beis din pator. But if you do it based on the court ruling, you're going to be exempt. Well, that's exactly like our Mishnah. So that works out. So now that's what we said is Rabbi Yehuda. Man Rabbanan, what's the brisa with that as the rabbis? And again, this brisa doesn't reference rabbis. So again, we're going to show how we know that the first brisa is Rabbi Yehuda, and the implication is that therefore the last brisa, this brisa that we're about to lead, is the Rabbanan. Titania, Adayan ani omer. You know what? Here, I might have thought that you could still say the following. Miyut kal shechatub chayavim. This brisa is very confusing. That if you have a minority of the community that sins, you're going to be liable. Now, this is a sin she'ein based in mivian al yadeim bar, because the court is not bringing a bull for them. So I might have thought that this is talking about where the Beis Din has issued a mistaken ruling. And then we say, Rov kahal shechatu yehu peturin. But if the majority of the congregation sinned, maybe they should also be exempt. Shaharei Beis Din mivian al yadein par, because the court does bring a communal bull for them. So I might have thought all of that. So Talmud Lomar me'am haaretz. So the Torah says from Me'am Haaretz, afilu ruba, even if a majority of the community sins, va'afilu kula, and even if the entire congregation sins, they're going to have to offer a sin offering. Now, what's confusing about this is that in the end we say that they're offering a sin offering, the community is offering a sin offering if the entire community sins. So that cannot be talking about a par elam davar. It can't be talking about where the Beis Din, where the Sanhedrin made a mistake. Because if the Sanhedrin made a mistake, we would offer a par elam davar, and the community would not bring an offering. So that must be talking about where everybody is sinning without any court ruling, meaning that everybody is just thinking all the same thing, and they're all sinning together. And then in the beginning, we say that we reference the fact that there's no bull offering, and so as a result, we say that the minority is going to be liable. So that seems to be talking about a situation where the court did make a mistake. So it's very, very confusing. So b'mai, what case are we talking about? If you want to say that it's talking about a mistake that was made when there was no teaching by the Beit Din without a court ruling, well, Beis Din, maya v'ditayu shelo b'horas Beis Din. Why would there ever be any involvement by a court in that case? There was no mistaken ruling. Beis Din ma'maitu shelo b'hora. The court never brings a bull offering without a court ruling. Ela b'hora. So it must be talking about a court, a mistaken ruling by the Sanhedrin. But v'haksiv me'am haaretz. But the pasuk me'am haaretz, which is Vayikra Dalid pasuk Kav Zayin, that pasuk is specifically talking about a regular sin offering. That's talking about with a regular sin offering where the court does not make a mistaken ruling. So Ela Lav Hakikamar. So here's what it must be saying: Miyut Kal Shechatu B'Shiggas Maaseh. That if in fact you have a minority of the community that sins based on that if in fact you have a minority of the community, sorry for not scrolling, if in fact you have a minority of the community that sins, so then I would have thought, chayavin, you're going to be liable. Everyone is going to be liable. Why? She'ein Beis Din miviin al yedehem par behora. Because if in fact it had been a sin based on the court's ruling, you would not have a bull. Ha-hein chayavin. But what does that imply? That implies that when they are liable, meaning ha-hein chayavin. So that would mean that they're liable. Meaning that why is it the Gemara is taking away from this brisa? Why is it that when a person individually sins, we're not going to make them liable for the sin offering? I'm sorry. Apologies. Why is it that when an individual sins, we're going to make the person liable for a sin offering? It's because if the court were to rule in that situation and this person were to do a sin based on the court ruling, there would be no communal offering, and so therefore the person makes his offering on his own. And that's the point. The point is that even when the court has ruled, because the court isn't making an offering as a community, there's going to be an obligation on the individual to make his offering personally. So and so ha-hein chayavin. So as a result, these individuals are going to be liable. And yachol rov tzibor she'asu b'shigos ma'aseh yehu peturin. Now, I might have thought, using that same language, that we could say that the person is going to be not liable in the case of when the majority of the community sins without a court ruling, because after all, if there had been a court ruling, well, then the court would have been liable for a par. It would have been liable for a bull. And so because in the case where there was a court ruling, you would have been liable for a bull, so maybe when there's no court ruling, and you have a majority of the community sinning, you also won't be liable for a personal individual sin offering. Sharei based in Mevin Aleim Par Bahora. That when if they do a wrong ruling, the based in brings a bull. So Talmud Lomer Me'am Haaretz. So that's what the Baraisa is trying to tell us when it references Me'am Haaretz. Afilu Rubo, even a majority. And so what comes out of this Baraisa is the following: that if you have a majority sin, let's start with minority. If you have a minority sin, and no matter what, you're going to offer a sin offering. Because either you're going to offer a sin offering because there is no apar alam davar, because after all, the court didn't make a mistake, or because even if the court did make a mistake, because there's still not going to be a par alam davar, because you don't have a majority, they're still going to have the minority bring a sin offering. And on the other hand, if you have a majority, well then, if it's a case where the court made a mistake, well then you'll offer a par alam davar, and the majority won't offer a personal sin offering. But if in fact everybody was sinning without any court ruling, well then, because there's no court ruling, we have to have a par alam davar. So Amara Papa Mimai. But 1 second, how do I know that that's the case? Dilma lo hain velo based in. Maybe when you have the minority of the people sin, and it's not based, and it's based on the court ruling, maybe nobody brings a sacrifice. After all, that's the position in our Mishnah. So you know what? We'll stop there. We have the question, and now we're going to come back with the answer, God willing, tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Yeah, it gets even more complicated, God willing. All right, looking forward to continuing our learning tomorrow.